Just play the damn thing.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Thank you very much for taking the time to tune into this here video. It is time for another edition of Viewers Comments. As always, if you would like to be featured in a future edition of Viewers Comments, leave a comment down below here in this video or any other video on this channel, and keep your fingers crossed. Also, before I forget, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button down below, as it really does help out a lot when it comes to growing the channel. And also, don't forget to hit the bell icon, because that will keep you up to date whenever there is new content uploaded on this channel, which hopefully happens at least semi-fairly regularly these days. I got an infant in the house. It's a little harder to produce content than it used to be. But yeah. So, let's get to some comments, shall we? I hope to see the shootout with this pedal and that other one you were showing that your friend made. Ah, you are referring to the Acapulco Gold, which is I did a demo on that a few months ago. You know, it's a pedal by Earthquaker Devices. One knob, it's basically their Sun amp, Sun Beta or something like that. So it's a Sun amp in a box. Kind of deal. Like I said, one knob. My buddy Park Kingery at Parks Custom Pedals, once upon a time, also created basically his own version of that pedal. It's not a direct clone, but it's along the same lines. I mentioned in that video that I'm gonna shoot the two of them out here one of these days, because it's kind of one of those circuits that you would think I really wouldn't like, but I guess it kind of reminds me of a rat circuit. It's just kind of got that nasty, gnarly type of characteristic that I'm abnormally drawn to for some reason. Anyway, but I'm gonna get to it. I've got a few other things on the docket that I have to get done first. I had some sponsored videos that required my attention first. One of them in particular was very difficult and time consuming, but I've got all that stuff caught up and out of the way now, so hopefully I'll be able to get to that one soon. EMG Super 77 are underrated active pickups. They are based on the DiMarzio Super Distortion. EMG 8185 is still killer pickups as well. I like active pickups. I like EMGs. I still have not had the chance to try out a set of Fishman pickups. I really want to try the Fishman Fluence modern pickups. I haven't had a chance to get my hands on those yet, but I like active pickups. I don't want them in every guitar that I own, but I do enjoy active pickups quite a bit. I have, for whatever reason, every single time I seem to buy a guitar that has EMGs in it, it always seems to have the 8185 set in it, but you could do a lot worse than the 8185 pickups. Of course, that's the famous Zakk Wylde pickup set. So maybe that might be a reason why I like them so well. I don't know. But I like active pickups. I like passive pickups too. Active pickups just kind of have a real specific tightness and bite to them that I really like about them. You know what else is cool if you've never played them is the DiMarzio Deactivators. Those are a set of passive pickups made by DiMarzio that are actually designed to sound like active pickups. I don't know how they pulled that off, but they did. I have a set of them in my Ibanez Xiphos that I break out and use on this channel every now and again. So those pickups sound great. I love those pickups. The Les Paul really is something special. You are referring to my new Les Paul Custom. Thank you very much. It was absolutely a dream come true to finally get to buy that damn thing. I've been I won't go through the whole story of how long it took me to buy it, but it was the guitar that I had always wanted. I finally got it. Now that I have that guitar, ironically, I'm not really shopping around for too many others, which is kind of unusual for me, but that's okay. I'm enjoying that one. I'm using it in videos a lot more than I thought I would be. I typically don't, sometimes I do, but I don't always use really high-end guitars and pedal demos and stuff, because not everybody has really high-end stuff like that. I didn't have high-end stuff like that for a long time, for years. I typically try to play like my Schecter CR6, for example, which is an $800 guitar. That's the kind of thing I generally try to use in pedal demos, because it's gear that pretty much anybody can buy. So, but right now I'm really enjoying playing my $5,500 Les Paul Custom, even in situations where maybe I shouldn't. Man, this kind of hurts. I've been looking at Zagers for a while. The main reason was made in the USA. I don't doubt that quality is top tier and up there with the other brands, but for me, that was sort of the main selling point. Buying a guitar made in the States with a seal of approval from the people making it, knowing I could order a guitar from Zager, knowing they never even had a hand, it just seems like buying any other guitar. I personally will be taking my business elsewhere with more transparency. I personally don't understand why they can't just be more transparent about their product, where they're produced doesn't, well, hopefully affect the quality. I just don't want to pay for a product that is predominantly advertised as made in the U.S. from a family business, which doesn't seem to be the case. Personally, I think if they rebranded it a little and had more transparency, their sales would go up. The last statement in particular, I agree with you quite a bit on. Though at this point now, who knows? I mean, the damage may be done. My relationship with Zager kind of went downhill quite a bit after that video. Their attorney even sent me a notice asking me to take it down. And I basically told him, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. More information came to light about your product, and I'm not going to lie to my audience. When that kind of thing happens, I have an obligation to inform you guys, about new information that I found or where I made a mistake or whatever that the case may be. As which was the case here with Zager and their country, where the damn things are made, and right, they're very non-transparent about about any of that stuff, and I've had some bad experiences. I've not bad experiences, but I've had some less than positive interaction with them on a couple of occasions since then. So you notice I got rid of the one that they sent me. So I don't. That was one I kind of wish I had just stayed out of, but now that I didn't, I'm debating whether or not I want to do a video on going into more details about all that stuff. I was originally just going to leave it alone and go about my business, but which is what I had been doing, and then all of a sudden they sent me this, this letter from their attorney wanting me to take that video down. I still haven't decided yet, what I'm going to do about that. What do you guys think I should do about it? Comment down below. I think I know what most of you are going to say, but maybe I'm wrong. Mogami makes an acceptable cable, but they certainly are not high-end or expensive. That Mogami cable you got ripped off for cost 86 cents per foot or less when purchased by the foot in bulk at the consumer level, let alone wholesale. Get some Evidence Audio Lyric HG and a better guitar and amp, and you should be able to hear some difference. That said, your average guitarist isn't going to know or care, and the main thing that matters is reliability, which the Mogami is going to be more reliable than Evidence Audio. But if you actually care about sound, the EA stuff is a superior product. Oh man, see, this is one of those instances when somebody that just they love whatever it is that they use, and they just cannot stand it if somebody doesn't love it as much as you do. So they gotta promote their favorite product, and at the same time, kick you in the nuts, and tell you why not only your product but you are inferior to them. So I don't know anything about Evidence Audio's product. I mean, who knows? Maybe they do sound better. Honestly, I think it's more of a myth than anything. At least it's very hard to make any kind of to hear any kind of discernible difference between cables like that. I did a video on that a while back. I'm sure they make fine cables. I kind of looked them up on Amazon real quick. They seem to sell for about the same price that Mogamis do. Mogami Gold Series are not. They're absolutely high-end cables, and they're actually absolutely expensive. 10-foot guitar cable is probably $65 or so, $65-$70. 25 foot's $85 or $90 now. Those are not cheap cables. They're not cheap cables, and they hold up extremely well, and most importantly, Mogami backs their lifetime warranty on it. You need a cable replaced, contact Mogami, and they send you out another one. Period. End. That's how that works. So that's why I like Mogami cables. Mogami cables. They're great cables. They're well made, and they're a great company. That said, I'm always open to trying new stuff, though. I mean, I need more cables, like I need a hole in the head. But I'm always open to trying other cables and strings and picks and all that kind of stuff. But I'm sold on Mogamis. I left Gibson years ago as a player. Finally came back. The quality is far better, and the guitars actually stay in tune from the factory, which has never been the case. Q&A still needs work, but they are more consistent now and sound fuller and superior to pre-2018-ish. They haven't sounded this good since the 90s and early 2000s. I agree. I mean, most of the Gibsons that I've gotten my hands on, and not just mine, but anywhere, checking them out in shops and stuff like that. I mean, most Gibsons nowadays, I think, generally speaking, they're thick. They are definitely improving their quality control. They're a lot more consistent. They're a lot less. I don't know if they're retailers, if there's a lot less of them being returned because of QC issues like there were before. There sure seems to be, and I don't seem to hear too much, at least not nearly as much about QC issues on new Gibsons that I once did. Certainly not the expensive stuff, not the custom shop. So to me, they sure seem to be doing something right. I've gone on and on about my Les Paul Custom. I've already talked about that guitar in this video, and it still plays and sounds. I mean, it plays and sounds great. It needed to be set up out of the box. It didn't want to stay in tune when I first took it out of the box. Turned out it just needed the strings needed to be stretched out a little bit. Needed to truss rod needed to be adjusted. A few tweaks here and there is all it needed. It just needed to be set up. That's all it needed. And ever since then, it's been a great guitar. Been an excellent guitar. So now here's the part where the comment section is going to get flooded with,
"Oh, I picked one up at a shop the other day, and it wouldn't stay in tune for it. Wouldn't do."
Okay, sure. Well, you picked one up at a shop the other day. You haven't owned it. You didn't work on it. You didn't set it up yourself. You didn't do all of the things that not just Gibson's, but pretty much any guitar needs to have done to it right out of the box in order to be a serviceable instrument.
"Oh, I just bought one brand new, and it wouldn't do this. It had this going on."
They're not perfect. I'm pretty sure that anybody from Gibson will still tell you that they're not perfect. All I'm saying is that they have improved. They are a lot better than they were, as this viewer has stated, pre-2018-ish, 2018, 2019, whatever year it was that they filed bankruptcy and changed ownership and all that kind of stuff. Rest in peace, Jim Irsay. I was absolutely heartbroken to hear that news. If you don't know who Jim Irsay is, Jim Irsay was the owner of the Indianapolis Colts. In our industry, he was also known as one of the biggest high-end vintage guitar collector and high vintage guitar and rock and roll memorabilia collectors, in the country, if not the world. I've seen his entire collection numerous times. I think I may or may not have done a video on, I took pictures once upon a time of everything. I don't know if I did a video on it or not. Maybe I should do that now that he's passed. That would be kind of my little tribute to him. But if you're an NFL fan, outside of Indianapolis, I know a lot of people have a lot of, not real nice things, or a lot of negative things to say about it. Yes, he was weird and kooky, and he was a lot of those. He made a lot of weird decisions that regarding football decisions didn't make any sense to anybody but him. But here in Indianapolis, he was beloved. Most people here in Indianapolis really like Jim Irsay. He did a lot for this community, and I'm not saying that as a Colts fan. I'm saying this as a guy that lives in Indianapolis. He did a lot for the community, stuff that you'll never hear about. He was insanely generous, with his time, his money. Jim Irsay was a good dude. He was a real good dude. His one-time curator of his collection is actually a friend of mine, and I heard a lot about him from him. So he will be missed. So you're telling me to go ahead and get the 1999 RG570 with stock pickups. Allow me to be clear here. I am not telling anybody to do anything, nor have I ever. The only thing that I do is provide information that I have in front of me and that I have available to me based on my experience, and maybe offer suggestions. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. That said, if, as it relates to pickups, if you were thinking about buying a particular guitar based on the pickups, especially if it was an actual, original RG570, yeah, I'm sure the electronics that are in it are just fine. There's a reason why Ibanez is reissuing the RG500 guitars right now. FYI, digital amps are solid state. Amps are either tube or solid state technology. If an amp is digital, that has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not an amp is either digital or solid state. It merely refers to the operation of the amplifier itself, i.e. the Line 6 Spider amps, which are in fact all digital. And oh, by the way, so was the Line 6 Spider valve amp. See what I did there? Here in this screenshot, there's links to a whole bunch of other tube amps that are in fact digital, such as the Hughes and Kettner Grandmeister was the Grandmeister 40 that they're doing now. The Rev G20, for example, is also a digital amp. There's lots of others to go along. There are digital tube amps out there all day long. My question is, as you stated here in your next comment, that since you've been working in the music store business since 1997 and now you work for a manufacturer, how come you didn't bother to answer back when I asked you what manufacturer you work for? Ugh, that tone and lay it down is what Frank Zappa called an electric ham sandwich. I like ham sandwiches. Glad you found your dream guitar. I'm not a Gibson hater. I absolutely love the brand, and especially Les Pauls. I've dreamt of owning a Les Paul Custom for a long time, but I bought and returned 3 Les Paul Customs in the last 5 months, all of them with issues a screwdriver setup could not fix. I'd also heard that they've gotten better, but I'm still looking for one that justifies the price. Like I said, mine took a little bit of tweaking. Stretching out the strings and just like I said, just basic setup stuff, and and I didn't give up on it. After I first tweaked it and and it went out of tune again. I kept at it and I kept playing it and just let everything settle in. Sometimes that's just what guitars need, Gibsons in particular. That said, you and I know that I had asked you later on in this thread, if these were brand new guitars and where they or if they were used, where they came from. You did go on to answer that they were brand new. They came from well-known retailers. So like I said earlier, they're not perfect. I'm not claiming that they are, merely that I've had a good experience. So I'm sorry that you haven't found yours yet. I truly hope that you do and you have the same experience that I've had with mine. How does it sound through the headphone jack? Well, I suppose it depends on how good your headphones are, really. Yeah, I know, in all seriousness, I know that sounds like a smart-ass answer, and to be honest, it kind of is, but but the truth is, there's a big difference in how a pair of $30, cheap headphones sound compared to, a pair of $180 Beyerdynamics. These are my DT990s that I've been using forever. I love these headphones. I also have a pair of blue Mixfy headphones. Unfortunately, these are discontinued. These are no longer made, and Blue's not really making Blue got bought out by Logitech, and then when Logitech took over, they pretty much discontinued everything in the line. I was lucky enough to get a set of these. Blue actually gave us, when I was with, and I'm going to leave my employer out of it, but when I was with a particular employer, right before Logitech took over, they gave us all a set of these. Anyway, but these are a set of $300 studio headphones. I don't use these too much. These are closed back, and when I put them on, they're pretty snug, but they're not, it's pretty easy to get fatigued with these. They're just not real comfortable to wear for long periods. The biggest difference of what you're going to hear is going to be the headphones that you're using as opposed to the headphone jack that they're plugged into. Any love for the 900? This is another one that I kind of answered a smart-ass comment, with a smart-ass response. My response to this was what it always is when when somebody brings up a piece of gear that is totally unrelated to the video or topic or post at hand. This is on a post that a community post that I put up here earlier this week about the JCM 800. The post basically said that I was basically saying, dear guitar players, the JCM 800 does not need to be modified in any way, shape, or form. It's perfect right out of the box, exactly how it is. Doesn't need anything. And that's how I feel. I love the JCM 800. Don't modify it at all. Don't touch it. Don't fuck with it. It's a fantastic amplifier. I love the way it sounds on its own. That was basically the gist of the post. A little bit longer version of it, but that's what it was. So then I got this comment, and you love for the 900. And usually these comments almost always lead to somebody looking for purchase validation, and I generally avoid giving out purchase validation whenever I can, because it drives me crazy. But that said, I do love the 900 series. I love the JCM 900s. I have a dual reverb sitting right over there. I've done several videos on that amp or using that amp. Videos based around that amp. Yes, I love the JCM 900s as well. Honestly, I don't know if I had to kind of go back and forth between the two, which one's my favorite. But I do love the 900s. Just not real sure why that got brought up at the time. Hey, what setup are you running? Do you use any pedals? I just bought an 86 Garib and would like to dial in a similar tone to yours and the sound demo at the end. Thanks. Oh man, this was, I'll be honest. The video that you're asking about, that was my old Forgotten Gems of the Past series, which I stopped doing those videos a long time ago. This particular one was, almost, I think, going on 6 years old now. So now, I'll be honest, I don't recall exactly everything that was used. I went back and watched it just because I don't think I've watched it since I posted it. And I did post a list of things, signal path up on the screen, and basically it was IK Multimedia. The full track at the end anyway was IK Multimedia Amplitude 4. I couldn't tell you what amp model I was using, within that particular plugin. I may have been using my Focusrite 18i20 by then. I could have been my Focusrite 2i2. I'm not sure. It could, like I said, it could have been it. It was a long time ago. The playthrough demo right before that, I did go and read the description on that video. It looks like I was still using. I think I did record that with, ironically, my JCM 900 going into my 1960. My Marshall 1964 12 cab, mic'd up with both an SM57 and an E906, Sennheiser E906 blended together, and then they went into a Tascam DP24 SD multi-track recorder. That was before I was even recording that stuff with a DAW. So I'm wondering if this could be used to sound a bit like a Heavy Rat or something. I like the sound of Steve Stevens in the 80s. You are referring to the Ibanez Super Metal Mini pedal. That was the video that this comment was left on. I own almost every version of the Super Metal that was ever made. I did a big shootout on those. I have an irrational attraction to both the Ibanez / Maxon Super Metal distortion pedals as well as Rat pedals. So I'm pretty familiar with both circuits. Or at least the sound qualities of both circuits. No, they are nothing alike. The Super Metal is actually, despite its name, it's actually like a really smooth, hard rock sounding type of distortion, I guess is how I would describe it. Versus the Rat is just this, what makes the Rat circuits unique. It's just that nasty, gnarly sound to it. That's how I always describe it, you know, and there's just really no other way to describe it because nothing else sounds like it. You know, it's just this gnarly sound of distortion that borders on becoming a fuzz, but not quite a fuzz. But even, you know, even with the gain knob turned all the way down, it's still like really, really high gain. It's both of them are pretty cool, but no, they're nothing alike. I very much enjoy my 2004 Gibson Les Paul Standard and 91 Gibson Les Paul Custom, both loaded with the EMG 8185 pickups. There's something special about getting the dream guitars that you've always wanted. And you are correct about that because, well, you mentioned it. I mean, it's just, like I mentioned before, you know, it's kind of, it's kind of blowing my mind a little bit. You guys are still commenting on that particular video, even though I know it's Gibson and I know it's Les Paul Custom. Those are always going to be popular topics, but you guys are still commenting on them. You know, and that video's 8 months old now or more. No, it's going on a year old now. Yeah, you know, the guitar that you have always wanted, you know, that the blood guitar, I call it. Once you finally acquire it, like I said, it's a pretty special experience. Like I said, I haven't really chased after any other guitars to add to my collection since acquiring that one. There's other reasons besides that, you know. Some of them are financial related, some of them are family related, but you know, it's not. I don't feel like I have all the guitar that I'm ever going to need for the rest of my life ever again. I'm not, you know, it's not. I'm not at that point, but you know, it's like it's just now that I have it, it's like that part of my guitar player's soul is now complete. With selling back to Guitar Center, does having the original box packaging, literature, etc. all nicely put back together add to the value of your trade-in, or does it not make much difference? I'm talking keyboards, drum machine type stuff. No, not really. You know, the reason being, especially, you know, drums, keyboards, drum machines, guitars, basically stuff like that. You know, even if you do bring the original box back in, chances are it's going to wind up in the trash. You know, because one, they don't have anywhere to store it. You know, because two, they want to display it on the wall. Three, customers, especially in most of those instances, customers want to buy it off the wall. You know, and that's where they want to see it. They don't want, nobody's going to buy it with it sitting in a box. So unless it's a factory sealed box, different story. But if a used guitar, used something like that, something that you've been using for a while, you just happen to have the original box with it, not going to add any value. Really about the only exception that I can think of, and even then this is questionable, would be if you happen to have the original box to the old vintage pedal or something like that. That might add a little bit of value if by some chance you happen to have the original box to an original Ibanez TS-808 or something. That might add a little bit of value, but that's it. Sometimes it's with used pedals, they may take them. When I was at the store buying a gear, if the box happened to come in with the pedal, I would take it. We would display it. Display the pedal on top of the box. It kind of made for a nice touch for the customer that bought it. To get it shipped to them. Still with the original box, but as far as adding any value, no. Nope. It's cardboard. Honestly, in most cases, it's just more work, if anything else. Actually, show me a good or fantastic solid-state amplifier in any usage category. Like, seriously. Now, let me read this again. Actually, show me a good or fantastic solid-state amplifier in any usage category. Like, seriously. For fuck's sake, the Roland JC120, the Randall RG100, the Randall RG80ES, Randall Century 100. Let's see. Gallien Kruger ML250, Ampeg VH140C, that crate equivalent to the Ampeg VH140C. What the model number escapes me, but it was basically the exact same power section because they were both designed by Lee Jackson. Marshall Mode 4 was basically solid state. There's the Marshall lead MOSFET lead. I can't remember. Lead MOSFET 100, I think is what it was called. That whole series. Those are all excellent sounding amps.
Shall I continue?
If you don't believe me on any of those, I'll give you some homework. Roland JC120, pretty much every Metallica clean tone that you've ever heard, was through a Roland JC120, or at least part of it was. Both guitar players, both James and Kirk, used the Roland JC120. Matter of fact, Roland actually custom made for each of those guys a head version of that amp. They each have a very, very rare Roland JC120 head in their rack. Again, specifically for all those famous Metallica clean tones. The 250 ML, basically pretty much anything Iron Maiden back in the late 80s was all on that amp. Dimebag Darrell played nothing but those old solid state Randall heads forever, and basically until he switched to the cranks. In an era when guitar players are basically doing nothing but discovering old gear that people have long since written off, and discovering exactly how good it is and how good it sounds, when utilized in the proper context with the right setup and the right gear. In an era that is going on, I can't believe we're still having this discussion. If anybody is still considering this, jeez, what a dumb shit. So that's it. That was the last comment. Thank you so much for hanging out for this edition of Viewers Comments. I really, really do enjoy doing these videos. It's fun. This is a good way for me to, to interact with you guys and, and answer a lot of questions, and I'll, respond to a lot of comments all at one time. It's just a lot of fun for me, and plus I get to talk about a lot of different subjects, and, sometimes that sparks new video ideas. Shit. So again, if you want me to respond to your question or comment in a future edition of Viewers Comments, drop a comment down below in this video or any other. As long as it's one worth responding to, by the way. Adios.